Hello everyone, I'm Craig Boswell. Today on Interview 360, a true inside look at diplomacy. Ambassador Chas Freeman is here. He served as chief interpreter for President Nixon during the 1972 trip to China, the historic visit that led to the establishment of diplomatic relations. Ambassador Freeman has the behind-the-scenes knowledge of the first contact between the two nations. He also returned to Beijing to serve as Deputy Chief of Mission at the newly established U.S. Embassy. So we have a lot to talk about, and Ambassador Freeman, it is good to see you.
Nice to see you, Craig.
Let's move on up to, you became the Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy, the newly established U.S. Embassy in Beijing. So you were also there from 81 to 84 in Beijing when the second U.S. President visit, Ronald Reagan, came. And the visit was, I think, a 6-day state visit.
Yes, it was in 1984. I should, by way of background, I was the country director for China at the Department of State, which was in those days a much more powerful position than it is now. I was the person who drew up a 5-year plan for the development of U.S.-China relations. When I went to Beijing to manage the embassy, first as chargé, because there was no ambassador, and later for the ambassador when he arrived. Between those two experiences, I participated in negotiating, I think, 36 treaties and agreements. So I had a unique experience in the creation of the framework for virtually every aspect of U.S.-China relations. Those frameworks are still there. So I also was the person who planned the structure of the embassy, a plan which was followed by my successors, who probably were not aware that I'd done it. So it was an incredibly creative period in U.S.-China relations. And, of course, China itself was rapidly changing. And here's the sequence. December 1978, December 15 here, 16 in China, U.S. and China agreed to release a communique with effect from January 1, establishing diplomatic relations. 2 days later, Deng Xiaoping convened the Central Committee in full plenum and launched his reform and opening.
As we mark the 40th anniversary of the normalization of relations, full diplomatic relations between the U.S. and China. How do you see then and now?
There's a common belief, I think it's held by people in China who are engaged in wishful thinking, and it's the gospel in the press in the United States that this quarrel is just about trade. That's not so. This is far more fundamental. It's deeper. It's going to take a long time to work itself out. There's some people who want to smash China. There's some people who want to punish China. There are other people who want to cut Chinese exports. There's some who want to open Chinese financial markets. And they're all in one big anti-China coalition. And if you're the Chinese negotiator, let's say Liu He on the Chinese side, and you agree with one of these programs, the people who are advocating the other agendas are going to trash the agreement because they didn't get what they wanted. So I sympathize with the Chinese trying to figure out what the Trump administration wants. I'm afraid we're going into a long period of tension in U.S.-China relations, but it will be different. We are globalized now. We are interdependent to an amazing extent. We have all sorts of personal connections that span the Pacific. There are people on both sides who have a good understanding of the other. So while the governments may be hostile to each other, I think the societies will remain committed to a relationship. And in due course, as has been the case with China's relationship with Russia, good relations will reappear. Well, in some ways, because of the deterioration in the relationship at present, we're back where we were. You know, it took Richard Nixon to see a strategic opportunity and a common focus for the U.S. and China. Mao Zedong saw it too. And we focused together on a common threat from the Soviet Union. We don't really have a common objective now. Climate change might be one. There are others that I could imagine, but we haven't come to that consensus. So we're in the same position we were really perhaps at the end of the 60s, early 70s, where we've got to rethink our relationship, redefine our objectives, find ways of working together despite differences. Our differences today are vastly smaller than they were in 1972. We agree on many, many things. We disagree on some. That should not be an insuperable problem to an improved relationship.
You're very specific in your language, and I appreciate that. As a diplomat, I think
you're meant to be precise.
Extremely important. Precision is key. But there's one way that you describe your work as a diplomat or diplomacy, and I think you said the basis of diplomacy is empathy.
Empathy is different from sympathy. Empathy is looking at the other fellow, understanding his or her perspective, history, aspirations, and then trying to deal with those on a realistic basis. Sympathy is agreeing with the other side, agreeing that their views are correct, that their history is as they see it, that their aspirations should be accepted. Diplomats don't do that. They try to understand the other side and produce a transaction or a relationship which is good for both, not just for one side. If it's only good for one side, it won't last.
30-year distinguished career as a diplomat, business leader, thought leader, author. So what are you going to do for an encore?
Well, I'm actually giving a series of lectures on diplomacy at the moment, which I probably will turn into a book. I think we've forgotten a lot of the vocabulary that we need because we went through a long period, the Cold War, in which there were two sides. Everything was simple. Everything could be related to the struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. Everybody in the world positioned themselves between us. That's all gone. The world is now in a state of disorder and evolving towards something we don't yet know. And in this competitive environment, we need to be able to live by our wits.
Planned trips to China coming up?
You know, I no longer enjoy long flights, so I think I'm going to stay home. Not that I wouldn't like to go to China. Of course, it's a kind of second home, and I have many friends there. But those friends tend to come here too, and it's more convenient for me to see them here.
Ambassador Freeman, thank you very much. Fascinating conversation.
I enjoyed it.
And continued success.
Well, thank you very, very much.
Hope they do come visit you in the U.S.
I hope they do, too.
Okay. And thank you for watching. This is Interview 360.